He's opinionated.
He's a good feller, I think. Yeah, I like him.
He's unapologetic.
Well, of course, I think he's hot, but, you know.
He's not afraid.
I think this is the best year he's had so far in his career.
He's always real.
Finn believes he is an African leopard and likes to go by his leopard name, which is Shroud. He has strong feline traits and likes to run and hunt.
He is Brett Mason.
And welcome into another episode of the Brett Mason Show. I'm your host, Brett Mason, and this is technically what is now the Liberty Report on the Brett Mason Show, or whatever name I could come up with that makes sense. We move to a more political, more political slant. And to further define the political slant, it would be a libertarian political slant, seeing as I am a libertarian, because I am pro maximum amount of freedom and maximum amount of liberty, just like our founding fathers were. I know that's strange to hear in today's day and time. Nevertheless, it's completely true. Hey, whether you found us on iHeartRadio, maybe you found us on TuneIn Radio, maybe you subscribe to the podcast on Stitcher or iTunes by looking for Brett Mason Show, I'm glad that you're here. And several of you have downloaded our free app, so I'd like to extend you a special welcome and thank you for getting that free app, of course, if you want it. A couple of ways you can get it. You can head on over to your app store, whether it be Android or iOS, and just search for Brett Mason Show. Download the free app. You'll get updated episodes. You'll be able to communicate back and forth with me from the app. And when we do live shows, you'll be able to interact live as well. So that'll be kind of cool. And if you can't remember all that stuff, maybe you can remember this. Brett-Mason.com/connect. If you'd like to connect to us in any of those ways. So it's easy links. You can just click on them. Brett-Mason.com/connect. Our show brought to you by Toyota Dothan Rental Cars, where if you need to rent a car, maybe you want to keep one for a weekend you're thinking about buying, you want the best rates, you don't want weird, wacky fees, and you want people that are awesome like my friend Courtney, Toyota Dothan Rental Cars. So, the subject of today's podcast will be Ben Carson. I remember when Ben Carson blew up big time and Republicans started screaming, because Republicans are, and I stand behind this. I'm not a Republican anymore, but I was for many years. Republicans are labeled as being racist people. And anytime you hear the word Republican, the word racist is inferred in the media and, I don't know, in politics. And that's just not true. There are racist Republicans. I mean, don't get me wrong. There's also racist Democrats. And there's probably racist libertarians, although I would say out of all of those, the percentage of the who's the racist is probably the smallest in libertarians. But I can't prove that. But that's just a feeling I have based on the way that libertarians think. I would think it would be very hard to be a libertarian and be a racist. That would be very difficult. Although anything is possible, I suppose. But he called out Obama at the National Prayer Breakfast over a lot of things that made Republicans stand up and yell, "Oh, now see, there is a black man we could support for president." And of course, the reason they were making that point is because they've just been yelled at and screamed at for being racist as to why they don't like Obama. Not like it had nothing to do with any of his policies or any of the things that he's done. I've disagreed with 85% of what Obama's done, and I'm certainly not racist. But I also wasn't looking for a black savior to be the antidote to prove that I wasn't racist. I thought it was some of the things that Ben Carson said was great, but I didn't automatically jump up and start screaming, "Let's make this man the next president." Honestly, you got to know a lot about a person as much as you can. And we just really didn't know much about him at that time. Since then, we have learned some things about him because he has spoken more. He's done more interviews. And so you get to hear a little bit more of what his thoughts are and things. One of my top two biggest problems with things Ben Carson has said is his limitations on the right to bear arms, which in my opinion, there should be no limitation on that. And I'll say that as far as F-16 fighter planes, Tomahawk missiles. Look, I run the gamut on it. The reason that we were guaranteed the right to bear arms was for a couple of reasons. it helped us to be able to defend ourselves in case we were invaded by foreign invaders. Because not only do you have the military, but when everybody in every house across the country is armed, it makes it very difficult for an invading army to come over and be successful. So that was one reason. The other reason was so that we would always have the firepower, the strength, the ability to not be overrun by our government. Now, the government doesn't like to hear this. They think that you're a threat. You're a national threat. You need to be put on watch lists and stuff if you say that, which is ridiculous. I have no designs on doing anything harmful to the government or anybody in government. I just want them to know their role. And I don't think they've anywhere broached the point where we would need to take up arms against our government. That being said, it certainly could happen at some point in time. History is a great indicator of that. And typically in history, when the government overreaches its bounds to the point of enslaving or completely depriving, beating down, dehumanizing their populace, there was no recourse for the populace because they weren't armed. So if the government has an F-16, I believe a citizen should have an F-16 if they want one and can afford it. Of course, they need to be able to do all the things anybody else could. You need somewhere to store it, and it needs to be stored at an appropriate place, and you need to be qualified to fly it or whatever. But I don't have a problem with somebody having an F-16 armed with Tomahawk missiles. I really don't. And I don't have a problem with people being armed with grenade launchers. The government has them. Government forces have them. So that being said, you can see my stance on the right to bear arms. I believe the right to bear arms goes way past pea shooters and .22 rifles. An arm is an arm, and we have much bigger arms today than we did when the Constitution was written. But they're bigger on both sides. So you don't just let the government side continue to get big and you not have the ability to combat it. I mean, you have to be able to beat them back and put up resistance in case it ever is necessary. Ben Carson said in an interview with Glenn Beck, another guy that has completely let me down, but I digress. He said that he believed your ability to own semi-automatic weapons should be based on where you live. Now, if that doesn't run contrary to the right to bear arms, I don't know what does. When it says shall not be infringed, I believe that means nothing. It shall not be infringed. Shall not, ever, under any circumstances, ever. No way, no how. He said, I think if you live in the midst of a lot of people, I'm afraid that a semi-automatic weapon is going to end up in the hands of a crazy person, and I'd rather you not have it. But now if you live in the country somewhere out by yourself, I have no problem with it. That's ridiculous right on the very face of it. I mean, there's nothing pro-liberty, pro-freedom, pro-American, pro-Constitution about that. It runs exactly contrary to the Constitution, and the reason we have ourselves in the fix that we're in now is because we've elected a bunch of yahoos up there who don't give a crap about the Constitution. They just don't. And that's why we find ourselves in the problems and the issues that we have now. If that weren't the case, we wouldn't be in this condition. So, I mean, that's always my main qualifier. Does a person respect and actually represent what's in the Constitution? And if they don't pass that test, then I'm never voting for them, ever, under any set of circumstances. I don't care what else they say. He said in an interview that he supported tariffs on products manufactured in other countries that were shipped here fully assembled. He thought the only way that you should allow products to come into the country that were fully assembled was to have tariffs on them. The only way to avoid tariffs would be have the parts be shipped here, but Americans put the parts together. Well, let me tell you something. Putting parts together in a product is not going to revive America. That's the crappiest, lowest paying, menial job that there is. That's not the kind of jobs we need. Jobs just for the sake of having jobs is ridiculous. Milton Friedman, who is one of my heroes, especially on matters of the economy, said this about tariffs. The supporter of tariffs treat it as self-evident that the creation of jobs is a desirable end in and of itself, regardless of what the person's employed do. That is clearly wrong. If all we want are jobs, we can create jobs at any given time. For example, we can have people dig holes and then pay them to fill them back up again, or perform other useless tasks. Creating jobs just for the sake of creating jobs is not good for the economy. And that's one thing I love about Milton Friedman. He's able to put it in terms anybody can understand. I don't think we want a huge portion of our population employed putting together Chinese toys. I mean, they can assemble them in China for, pay somebody 8 cents to work all week. And here, somebody's got to have minimum wage. I mean, I can't even imagine what the price of a Tonka truck would cost if we had to go to that. So there would be more jobs here, but at what cost? At what repercussions? I submit to you that they would probably be pretty hefty. Back during the big insurance and healthcare debate, Carson said this: the entire concept of for-profits for insurance companies makes no sense. I deny that you need care, and I will make more money from it, he said. That's totally ridiculous. The first thing we need to do is get rid of for-profit insurance companies. We have a lack of policies, and we need to make the government responsible for catastrophic health care. Hello? That's Obamacare, basically. It actually goes past Obamacare when the government is made responsible for all catastrophic health care. Look, here's the problem with insurance. There is no problem with insurance. The problem with insurance is that people have treated that as they equate insurance with health care, and the two things are not combined at all. You don't have insurance on your car to get it washed, to get the oil changed, to refill the wiper fluid, to check the radiator, to check the air pressure in the tire. You don't have insurance for all of that. That's just stuff that you handle on your own. You have insurance on your car in case a catastrophic event happens, like an accident, and you're facing a large bill that you just wouldn't have out-of-pocket money to replace it, and so the insurance covers it for you. That's what health insurance was originally designed as. People just went to the doctor and paid the doctor for the doctor visit. You didn't have the insurance paying them and you paying a deductible. You want to know why insurance prices are so high? You included insurance in every aspect of healthcare. Every aspect, from a simple office visit right on up to major surgery and hospitalization. And insurance isn't designed for that. So if you're going to use insurance as your primary means of handling healthcare, you're just going to have high prices. There's just no other way around it. People that don't understand that the only way insurance companies can make money is if the risk of you needing the money is less than what they're getting compensated for supplying the coverage. In other words, if they took everybody who's between the age of 40 and 60 in America, and they know on average how much it's going to cost to care for those people for 20 years, 40 to 60. They have all these numbers. They know what the average cost per person is. They have to charge everybody an amount of money that's going to come in above that, or else they don't make a profit. They don't pay the bookkeeper. They don't pay the receptionist. They don't pay the claims people. They don't have the money. If they just break even, they don't have money to pay people with. So just by default, your health care is going to be more expensive because you're tacking on an amount of money above what's required to pay for your health care to pay the insurance companies. Now, there's nothing wrong with that in and of itself other than it's just stupid. I don't think that we should ban it. I don't think there should be something in law to outlaw it and say that people can't get insurance. If you want to get insurance that covers you from cradle to grave for every bump, bruise, hospital visit, cough syrup, and everything else, that's fine. That's your right. But don't bitch about how much health care costs if you're going to do that, because you're part of the problem. So now you may be saying, well, Brett Mason, do you have insurance? Yeah, I have insurance because I'm forced to now. But I have had periods in my life where I didn't have insurance. And then the insurance that I had before Obamacare came, which I really loved that insurance. It was very affordable and it handled my needs quite adequately, was basically catastrophic care insurance. It didn't really do much squat for hospital visits. Doctor's visits. If I went to the doctor and had a office visit, it really didn't help me that much there. But I didn't care about that. How many times are you going to go to the doctor? A couple times a year? You're paying way more than that. Just pay the office visits out of your pocket. You just don't need that in insurance. So I had basically a catastrophic care plan, but of course there was a deductible and it did pay for office visits and stuff, but it was just very bad. It was because that just adds cost to the policy and winds up costing you more overall. So yeah, I have insurance now. I do because it's required by law. But when Obamacare went into effect, my insurance suddenly didn't meet the threshold anymore, and I couldn't have it. I had to let it go, and my insurance costs went up 40%. My insurance is now in one day, from the day that policy expired to the next day, I got the most affordable, most comparable, closest to what I had insurance that Blue Cross and Blue Shield offered, and it's 40% more than what I'm paying. So that's what Obamacare did for me. So that's a combination of me paying for insurance and having to pay for a government to regulate insurance and boss people around. It cost me 40% more. And so we're screwed. That being said, back to the original point of Ben Carson's, his views on insurance companies, that's just ridiculous. So, the dude is liberal. He's liberal. He thinks the government, this is a quote, we have a lack of policies. We need to make the government responsible for catastrophic health care. No, you don't want the government being responsible for any of your health care. Least of all catastrophic. So, I'm sorry, the dude, if you're a conservative, he's not your guy. Of course, I go back to Mitt Romney. I can't tell you how many of my Republican friends beat me down with the iron fist of trying to force me to bend to their will over Mitt Romney because I didn't vote for him. He invented government health insurance. So conservatives and Republicans not being against government health insurance, you don't have a good record on that, Republicans. I'm sorry. You supported Mitt Romney in droves. You wanted that man in. Tens and tens of millions of people voted for him in, and if there's never has been a bigger government health insurance guy than Mitt Romney. That blew my mind too, but I digress about that. But there's never been anything more mind-blowing to me than that whole chain of events. So hell, I don't know. Maybe Ben Carson is the Republican guy. Apparently, the Republicans like nominating folks who like big insurance. Those would be reasons that I really think, and I think those are plenty of reasons why he should never get anywhere near the Republican nomination. And he's polling pretty low, so I don't think there's much chance of it happening. Hopefully race doesn't come up, because I think you can just take any number of his comments and prove that he's just not. Well, again, I can't say he's not a good Republican candidate, because he's probably more conservative than Mitt Romney was, and he was the nominee last time around. Things that libertarians would have issues with Ben Carson on would be a lot of things. One of the most craziest things he said was that he believes being gay is a choice, and he believes that the prison system turns people gay. He said people go into prison straight, and when they come out, they're gay. I don't know what he knows about prison. But the gay stuff that happens in prison, it's not by choice for most folks. If I was in there, I would be brutalized. I'm just going to be honest with you, because I ain't cut out for it. God help me to toe the line and never wind up in prison, because prison ain't for me. So that's something that, when it does happen, is usually isolated in there, and when folks leave prison, that usually is not a part of their life. I'm not saying that some people may not leave prison and hold on to that. I guess it's possible, but generally that's not the case. More so, they just don't even talk about it, period. It's just something that's not talked about. I know several people who are prison people, and I've never ever heard them talk about their experiences in prison with the gayness. Now, maybe they avoided it. It's hard for me to believe that all of them did, because it's not like I think everybody in prison is having gay sex. I just don't think that's the case, but I think it does happen, and I think for a lot of people it happens to. It's not pleasant or voluntary. But again, that's another thing. But my whole argument with this gay being a choice, I'm going to submit this question that I submit to anybody who tries to tell me that being gay is a choice. Me not being gay, obviously I can't relate to it other than intellectually. In other words, I can make my brain try to think the process through. I can try to come up with the best intellectual, reasonable, logical answer that I can come up with. But it's all purely cerebral. Because I'm not gay, so I can't speak to it from a gay perspective. But I do know this. If you believe that a person can choose to be gay, that means, and if kids are listening, take them away from the podcast right now. But if you believe that a person who's straight, because there is no gayness, it's just something you choose. If you believe that they're wired up just like you are and just like I am, if you believe that they can just voluntarily choose to partake in gay sexual situations, you're insane. Because you think about it. If you're a man listening right now, I want you to think about, I'm trying to think how I can say this without being completely disgusting. But if you're a man who's straight, I want you to try to picture in your mind right now you choosing to perform fellatio on another man. Just think about it. Just think about it. Try to imagine yourself doing it. You can't do it. My guess is you're probably completely disgusted and freaked out by the thought of it. Now, how do you suppose that other straight people thought they just made themselves think of it and go, "Oh, I'm going to make myself think that's good"? No, that didn't happen because they're gay. They're not like you and me. They're wired up different. They were born that way. They didn't have a choice. They feel pretty much about straight sex the same way we feel about gay sex. It's unnatural. It's a tad on the disgusting side to us. It's just something our mind can't go. And if you're a gay person listening to this, I'm not disparaging you in any way. I do hope you see that I'm defending you and your life and your point of view and your stance that you are that person. I hope you see that when I use things like disgusting. That's just the truth. A straight man will generally think in terms of two gay men doing things as being disgusting. We can't help it. That's just where our brain works because we're not gay. And I can assume that you have the same shudder reflex. I assume a gay man would have the same shuddering reflex to having, the thought of or the act of having sex with a woman. Now, that being said, I know that gay people have done it to stay hidden or disguise the fact that they were homosexual. So I'm assuming that it can be done. And the other thing that I would acknowledge is that there is a percentage of people participating in the gay lifestyle who are not gay. Women primarily, and I'm not trying to disrespect you women, but I'm going to tell you, girls now, I haven't dated anybody in the last 15 years that was female that hadn't made out with another female at some point in time in their life, whether it had been briefly when they were 16 or 15 or in a drunken college night one night. Girls just do that. So, and some of them do it for a while. They'll be with a woman for a while, and they're not gay. I don't think men do it quite as much. I don't think you'll find men choosing, not straight men. And so that leads you to the whole concept of bisexuality, someone who has a preference for both. And that gets us off into the weeds. I can't really speak about that. I can't possibly delve into the human psyche, the physiological components, and everything else involved. All I have is my logical ways of thinking. What it boils down to as a libertarian is all of those things are completely irrelevant because it's none of my business what somebody else does. It doesn't matter to me. I don't care if it's natural. I don't care if they decided to do it. Ultimately, even though I don't believe that's the case, it doesn't matter if I think that because it's none of my business. What somebody else chooses to do as a grown adult is their business, as long as they aren't harming me. When their decisions threaten me with harm, threaten me with damage to life, limb, and property, damage my pursuit of happiness, then I have a problem with it. But up until that point, people can do whatever they want. That's what libertarians believe. Libertarians believe that you maintain all rights. You have all rights until your rights infringe upon somebody else's rights, up until that point. And that's where they stop. So I just don't care what people do. I don't think about it. It's not any of my business. So from a libertarian standpoint, I mean, Ben Carson is definitely out there for that reason. And then the last reason is his stance on marijuana. I have yet to meet a libertarian that believed marijuana should be illegal. Matter of fact, most libertarians who are 100% pure libertarian believe all drugs should be legal. And I think there's a good case for that. All the drug running, murders, cartels, and everything that happens bad associated with drugs happens because the drugs are illegal. The law creates the problem. And I don't understand why people don't see that. If you don't charge people for and arrest people for it and make it where it can't be gotten or you can't make it yourself, if you don't do all that and limit people, then we don't need cartels and gangs and drug runners and stuff. We don't need, there's no need for that anymore. All that goes away immediately. So, I think probably one place where I would start to part ways with a lot of hardcore libertarians, and I'd be fine with it. If they were all made legal, I'd be fine with it. I wouldn't buck it or say, oh, God, that shouldn't be. It's just not, I'm not 100% there as if I was to advocate for it. But what I can advocate for is possession. Anybody should be able to possess anything they want as long as they're not harming somebody else with it. So what that would do is, I still think you could have it where it's illegal to sell it. I think it could be illegal to sell crack. It could be illegal to sell heroin, illegal to sell meth, but not illegal to possess it. And so that being the case, people could get their own, especially for weed. You grow your own weed. You don't need to buy it. You can possess it. I think there should be zero limitations on weed. If beer is going to be legal, weed should be legal. Because I'm just going to be honest with you right now. In my earlier years, a long, long time ago, I did both. And I functioned a lot better on weed than I did on alcohol. I never even came close to having an accident because I was stoned. I never once got mad at somebody and wanted to fight them because I was stoned. I never once thought about breaking into somebody's car, breaking into somebody's house, jacking somebody up on the street corner because I was stoned. When you're stoned, you just want to be left alone and you just want to enjoy the beautiful world around you. And then you want to eat. And that's it. Alcohol, on the other hand, will cause you to be upset. It'll cause you to misunderstand things and make you want to fight somebody. Your ability to drive a vehicle is completely impaired. I mean, the worst thing that ever happened to me stoned with my driving is sometimes I forgot where I was going. That was the worst thing that ever happened. And that happened several times. And you next thing you know, you're 5 miles past where you're going to turn. You're like, oh, crap, man, I was supposed to turn back there. I got to turn around and go back. So the worst thing that's going to happen for somebody getting stoned is they're going to be late to something. And there's more and more research coming out. I saw somebody posted on Facebook a couple of days ago, research from some university that confirmed that. The effects that marijuana has on driving is negligible. That being the case, that's irrelevant. You could still make it legal and people not be able to drive stoned because you do it for beer. So beer's legal, but you can't drive drunk. So you could do the same thing with marijuana if that's your concern. I don't think your concern is well-founded, but if that's your concern, I'm going to grant you that one. I'm just going to not debate that point and grant you that marijuana is bad for people driving. And so we just have, laws where people can't drive and smoke. Just like beer. So, I never did get to his comments, but Ben Carson said this. Marijuana is what's known as a gateway drug. That's such BS. It's been proven so many times marijuana is not a gateway drug, any more than anything else is a gateway. Hanging out with the wrong people is the gateway drug. Being disenfranchised from your parents and is the gateway drug. Being a loner and needing to fit in is the gateway drug. Way more than marijuana I ever thought about being. I smoked a lot of weed way back in the day. And it never made me want to do meth. It never made me want to do crack. Never made me want to do cocaine or heroin or none of that stuff, ever. I never once wanted to do any of that stuff. Continuing on with Carson's claims. It tends to be a starter drug for people who move on to heavier duty drugs. I don't think this is something we really want for our society. We're just now removing all the barriers to hedonistic activity, and we're so quickly moving to a different type of society, no one is getting a chance to discuss it. What? For people, look, you really only have to go back to your founders. If you just go back to the founders and read their writings and see how they lived. Marijuana, everybody grew marijuana during the days of our founders. Hemp, which is one of the greatest things ever, by the way. Everybody had hemp. They made everything out of it. Wrote on it, paper, ropes, trees, and I don't know what all hemp. It's just basically not anything you can't do with hemp. Ben Carson. He's not going to be the Republican candidate, and no libertarian in their right mind, unless they're at the barrel of a gun, will ever vote for Ben Carson. God bless him. He has a lot of great points about him. He has said a lot of wonderful things. He is not the guy to lead the country. Give me liberty.
You can subscribe to the podcast, download the free smartphone app, and find more ways to connect to the show at brett-mason.com/connect.